Welcome friends, I'm Will Whitfield with W3 Productions. Today I wanted to discuss how to make a 3D object follow a path while rotating, much like a wheel. You may want to do this for several reasons, such as rigging a car or a wheel or disc-like object flying through the air while spinning, such as a discus or a spinning star or something else that comes up in your imagination. I will warn you, this is not a 100% perfect solution, but this can get you most of the way where you're trying to go. So let's go ahead and get started. First we're going to create our disc-like object. I'm not going to make a wheel, I'm just going to make kind of like a ring or a disc. So I'm going to be, by the way, this is Blender 2.8. Going to delete the default cube, and I'm going to add a torus. So Shift A, Mesh, Torus, and I'm going to go to the options for that and change the major segments from 48 to 12 and the minor segments from 12 to 3. So we see this is our disc shape, kind of flat on the inside and two sides on the outside. I'm also going to rotate it on the x-axis by 90 degrees. I'm going to hit Control A to apply the rotation and scale. So that now we have our object. I'm going to add a little bit of color to part of the object so we can tell which direction the object is rotating. So I'm just going to go to the edit mode, go to face select, and I'm going to hold Alt and click on one of these edges to select this edge, face loop. Then go to the materials tab, and for our default material I'm just going to click on the material that's already there. I'm going to add one more, hit new, and give it a red color. Also, so we can see it here, I'm going to go to viewport display and give that a red color. And for that to work, we have to hit assign. So I'm going to tab back into object mode. Next part, we're going to create our armature. This is going to consist of about 3 bones. So Shift A, armature. Now if you have extra objects selected in your preferences, you might have a drop down list here. So you just select single bone, but I'm just going to hit armature because that's the only object I have. And now we want to set this up. I'm going to go to tab to go into edit mode. Then for our rotation, I need to rotate on individual origins. Select this bone. I'm going to hit RX 90. This will be our axle. So for our next bone, I'm going to hit Shift D, X to move along the X axis to about here. Rotate on the Z axis 90 degrees, negative 90 degrees. This will be kind of our forward pointing like driver or whatnot. Hit 1 to go to front view and 5 for orthographic view. Shift D to copy it again, and this will be kind of our root bone. I'm going to scale it up a little bit. And I want to parent both of these, so I'm holding Shift, select those, and parent them to this bone right here. Then I'm going to hit Control P, keep offset. Now I'm going to add a bone constraint for the axle. Actually, let's go ahead and name these by going to our armature tab. Oops, actually our bone tab. And we actually need to go to pose mode to name them. So I'm going to hit Alt, Tab, Pose. With this bone selected, let's go to, I think this is our original bone. Bone 1 and bone 2. Let's call this one the root. I'm going to call this one, if I say driver, that's going to be kind of confusing because there are drivers in Blender. So let's say forward. And let's call this one axle. Probably could did this in edit mode, but either way, we need to be in pose mode for the next part. So with the axle selected, I'm going to go to the Bone Constraints tab, add a constraint, transformation. Our target is going to be this forward bone, so target is going to be armature and then forward. We want to go ahead for our source, we want to extrapolate. And for each one of these, we're going to have the source be location and set each of the X, Y, and Z coordinates, because as the path turns, we're going to be going in a new cardinal direction. So for each one, I'm going to enter a value of 10 for the minimum and -10 for the maximum. 10, -10. 10, -10. We're going to leave this alone for right now. We're going to mess with source to destination mapping a little bit later. For the destination, make sure you select rotation. And then for right now, we're going to use the Y rotation. And I'll show you why. If we go to the armature tab and go to viewport display, we're going to go ahead and check names, so we see what bones we're talking about, and also axes. For right now, you see we have locally our axle is pointing, we want to rotate on its local Y axis. And then if we start off going in a negative X direction globally, it's actually, for this forward bone, is heading in its local Y direction. It'll make more sense in a moment. So let's go back to the Bone Constraints tab and put in a minimum value of 360. If you want your object to spin faster, you put in a higher value here. And for the max, -360. And if you want it to spin the opposite direction, you would flip these two values. For the space, we're going to put in local with parent and destination local space, or owner is local space. So if I grab this forward bone and move it, I'm hit G, Y, Y to move locally in the Y direction. It's the axle bone spins on its Y axis. Now if I go and click on this axle and change the mapping from Y to X and move this, if I hit G, Y, Y, it no longer spins. If I hit G, X, X, it does spin. Same thing if I go here and map it Z to Y, hit G, Z, Z. It will rotate. So now we have that working. Say we move this, the whole armature moves. We need to go ahead and parent the disc to this axle. So hit Control Tab, select the disc first, then right clicking, selecting the armature. I'm going to hit Control Tab to go back into pose mode. Select the bone we want to parent to, which is the axle. Hit Control P, then select bone relative. And now when we move, let's go ahead and change the mapping back to where we had it, Y to Y. I hit G, Y, Y, the disk spins. Hit Control Tab to get back in object mode. Right click to deselect everything. The next thing we want to do is create a path. Before we create a path, I do want to note that there is a way to recalculate the role of each object so that the axes point in different directions, and it kind of affects how we set keyframes later on. So let's go ahead and do that just to show you how to do that. So go back to pose mode. Hit A to select all the bones. I don't know the short key, so I'm gonna hit F3 to search and type in recalculate. Actually, I think I need to do this in edit mode. So tab to go to edit mode, F3 to search, recalculate roll. And notice for most of them the Z is pointing down right now. Recalculate roll. Global Z plus. Now all the Z axes are pointing forward. Now if we want to mess with other axes, we could recalculate those, but let's go ahead and keep it as it is right now. So back to object mode so we can create our path. So Shift A, curve, path. Can barely see it. Hit tab to go to edit mode, and we want to actually branch out in the negative X direction. So I'm going to hit RZ to rotate on the Z axis. It doesn't work because we are using the pivot point of individual origins, and for that to work we need to go back to median point. RZ 180, and we want the curve in different directions, so I'm going to select this first point of the curve and zoom out here a little bit. I'm going to put it way over here. I'm going to take the second point, and you can make your curve go any direction you like, but I just want to go basically in a straight direction, curve up here, curve down, curve back up, and then we'll go down in the Z direction here in a moment. Take this third one here, move it a little bit down here. Take this one, move it up here. I'm going to take this last one and extrude, hit E to extrude. I'm heading back in the X direction. E to extrude again. So we have that. We need some more points, so I'm going to select this point, hit W, subdivide, we get a new point in the middle, hit G, move it down this way, make this one a kind of a steep curve. We do need a little bit more for this curve to move closer to this point, so select these 2 points, hit W, subdivide, move this one further up. This is not going to be as steep of a curve, but we need one more point here. Hit W, subdivide, move it kind of like that. I think that'll be good for these 2 dimensions. Like I said, we want, actually it did curve on its own. I must not have been looking down totally. That's fine. We'll see what kind of results we get. I'm going to hit E to extrude, move in the Y direction a little bit, and then I'm going to go straight down. Hit E, Z, hit it, do the same thing one more time. Hit tab to go back to object mode, and this is our path we want this disc to go in. So to get this to follow the path, I'm going to select the armature. Control tab to go to pose mode. Select this root bone. I want that to follow the path. So add a bone constraint. Not an object constraint, but a bone constraint for that one bone. Add bone constraint, follow path. Target the nerve's path, which is the only path we have here. And I'm going to go in a negative x direction, which is in general that's the way that the curve is going. And to get it to follow the path, because right now if we scrub the timeline, no movement's going on, we hit animate path. Now we scrub the timeline. Zoom out here. Let's observe what happens. I'm actually going to hit play. We have some rotation, and it moves down, it stops rotating. A couple things happen here. The first thing we see is that the animation completes in about 100 frames, even though our scene is 250 frames. That is controlled by the path itself. So if I go to object mode, select the path, and go to the object data tab, and go to path animation, the frames here control how long it takes to complete the path. Also, the evaluation time can control it as well. You keyframe the evaluation time, control what happens when. And you see if I make it below 100, it's actually a fraction of whatever the number of frames are. So it's a fraction of 100, controls that. But we don't want to mess with that for our purposes today. I just want to increase this to 250. So when I scrub the timeline, it takes 250 frames to complete the animation. The other thing we see is that, move this around, is that the wheel doesn't necessarily turn with the path. It stays in one direction even though it rotates. To fix that, you just select the bone that is following the path, go to the bone constraints, and click on follow curve. Now it turns in the direction that the path turns. Now we observe that we go back to the beginning. While it's going in the negative x direction, which is locally the y direction of this this bone when we start out, it rotates as we expect it. As soon as it turns here, and it kind of slows down its direction, its spin, but it's still pretty good. Then we go in another curve, and it's basically going in a global y direction. It barely spins at all here. Same thing when it goes up in the y direction, or the opposite direction, y, and it barely moves at all in the z direction. So there are probably a couple of methods of how to change this behavior. I'm going to do it through changing these parameters and keyframing them. Basically the source to destination mapping, and messing with the y rotation of that axle bone. We could mess with the direction that these axes point in and things like that. I think it's probably a little bit messier than what I'm about to do. So from here to about here, I think we're good. The first thing we need to really worry about is going from here to here. So let's go ahead and move. We get to here. I think about here is when we need to start changing our mapping. So I'm going to hit I while hovering over this Y to put a keyframe, and then move over one frame, and we're going to change this to, I believe, an X. And while you say X, let's go back to the beginning here. Let's say if I move this in the local Y direction, it spins. This is its when you go up and down, from our perspective, this is it. This bone's local X. So that's why we're changing that mapping to X. So select that bone again. Let's go back here, one frame over from where we made that first keyframe. We're going to change this to X and add a keyframe. So let's see what happens. So we're going good. So now we get spin. We get an okay amount of spin. But it is now moving in the opposite direction, which is not what we want. Let's watch the next part too. Now when we go to totally opposite direction, it is spinning the way we want. So let's see. Let's go ahead and actually trying to see where it actually starts changing direction. So it round about here. So I want to keyframe that so we don't have to do it again when we get to this part, to this section. So I'm going to hit I for keyframe. And then let's move back one. Actually, no, we're fine. You know what? Just skip everything I just said. Hit Alt I, because that's not the parameter we want to change. About here, this is what we want to change. We're going to flip these numbers over, make this negative, make this positive, and then that'll reverse the rotation. But we want to keep the rotation the way it is now for this part. So hit I on these two, then go back one frame, and let's make this negative 360, make this 360. Let's go back here. We need to go right to this keyframe and also do the same thing. Actually, Yep, keyframe it right here. Then right here we need to flip it back to where it was. We should have put a keyframe here earlier. Negative 360. Keyframe, one frame over. So let's do a sanity check, make sure we didn't mess up anything that we had earlier. Spinning good. Still spinning good. Alright, so I think we're about almost done. So these directions, I'm just going to hit play. These directions seem pretty good. Spin, spin, spin. Alright, so now we want to take care of our Z direction. So same concept. Try to figure out frame by frame where does it really stop spinning. It's kind of hard to tell. Think about. Now let's go ahead and go with this spot right here. So let's keyframe it right here. Hit X or I to insert a keyframe. One frame over. Let's change this to Z. Add keyframe there. And let's see what happens. Scrub the timeline. So now it does rotate on the way down, but again it's going in the opposite direction of what we want to do. It just flips direction while it's spinning. So let's go here. Add keyframes as they are now. And then one frame over and flip them. Negative 360. 360. Add keyframes for each. Let's go back a little bit. and now it rotates in the direction you want. Now I say this is not perfect because let's scroll in on the timeline a little bit. Let's scroll in. You can kind of tell right around when it between two keyframes, it jumps a little bit. Do you see that red spot jumps? So you will kind of may or may not kind of stutter or rotate randomly between keyframes, but if you're have a shot of a car or something spinning real fast, faster than 360 degrees, it might not really matter for your animation. It might get you where you need to go. Especially if you're not focusing on that during the entire shot, but you want to have the entire shot or scene animated. So hopefully this gets you where you need to go, and this will be helpful for you. If you have a better method, I'd love to hear about it. I'm sure other people would love to hear about it, so leave something in the comments below. If you found this helpful, you like it, leave a thumbs up. Please consider subscribing to our channel. It helps out a whole lot. Thank you. Have a blessed day.
And the words were all written in tongues, so I didn't really understand them. But how many of y'all know the Lord will always leave you a ham in the bush? Is that wrong?